Marilyn Howshall of Empowered Hearts Ministry, ministering revival and reformation to the family for 30 years.
So back in 1852, when mandated attendance became a thing, okay, and Christians everywhere began surrendering their children to the government school system. Based on these commands in Scripture, what were we supposed to have done? We were supposed to drive out the wickedness. We were supposed to expose the deception, and we were not supposed to cooperate by giving the land of our family over to the government. We entered into a mismated alliance with them, as 2 Corinthians 6 tells us not to do. I'm going to read that passage in a little bit. But this is what we've done concerning the land of the education of our children. You think, of course, you send your children to government school, doesn't everybody? Well, yes, everybody has been for the last 6 to 7 generations, but that doesn't make it right. It doesn't mean we were supposed to. We were supposed to be considering God's will on the matter. That's a wide path that everyone was going. But Jesus calls us to the narrow path of life. We mingled with the practices and customs of the world around us in disobedience to God. We didn't even consider that God had something to say about how we parent, how we educate, or how we disciple our children. Discipling practices rose up to be patterned right after the education system, which was faulty right from its inception. We've worshiped and served the world's ways of educating our children so much so that we can't imagine any other way. Isn't this true? We've walked away from the raising of our own children. We've walked away from educating, and we've walked away from discipling them. We've walked away from parenting them. We've put the most important needs of our children's lives and the most important equipping of their lives in the care of strangers, in a heathen system to tend to. Our children belong to God, not to the world, to be influenced with the world's wicked ways and wicked value system and false ways of educating. They have been given to us, the parents, to carefully steward and guard them for Him. What a terrible example we've been. We're supposed to be lights to the world. We're supposed to have the answers the world comes to us for. We weren't supposed to turn to the world ever. They could come to us, but we must not go to them. God told Jeremiah the prophet that. We're supposed to have God's model for parenting. We're supposed to have His model for educating our children, but instead we served the world system, basically giving them a blank check to do what they want with our families, rarely even noticing what has actually been going on. We've never even made the connection that the bad fruit in families, including the loss of identity in children, could be due to the general lack of parenting for having children separated from their parents all day for most of childhood. The relational connections are missing for children. They need the relational connections with parents in order to come into their identity. So we've been going to the world for godless and lifeless substitutes. We've put a heavy burden of our own making on our children and oppressed them in ways that we cannot even imagine. So what's the burden they're being oppressed with? Well, for one, children are imprisoned in a make-believe artificial world that has nothing to do with reality and how real life works. Children are left to have to figure out many important matters on their own. Our nation's schools have been infiltrated by a divisive, political agenda. And the goal is to indoctrinate young people with false narratives. And this didn't just begin when prayer was taken out of the public schools. It was going on long before that. There have been versions of deception going on for over 170 years in our public school system, ever since the first generation of Christians surrendered their children to the government school system back in 1852. Now, in recent decades, the deceptions concerning abortion and the more recent sexual deviancy and gender confusion are merely more blatant than before. The enemy certainly got a jump on the church, didn't he, with the public school system? Well, the enemy had a right to it because it never belonged to the church. It never belonged to the church. Listen to the video that I did called "The Covenant the Church Made," opening the door to abortion in this country. It gives you a history of how the public school system started. It has always belonged to the government, having been spawned by the enemy right from its inception. Yes, I believe that the church was supposed to be influencing it at the governing tiers of the system, but not while sending our children there. We, the church, left the education of the young unguarded. We, the church, were never supposed to have surrendered our children, no matter how good we thought the schools were. You see this? We've left the land of our family unguarded, and the enemy has taken over.